let's take an idea of like, hey, you know what, that there's distance, or I don't have too much time with my child. How do I still build a relationship? How do I still make them feel like, I care about them and I love them? It could be as simple as a text. Take 30 seconds to say, good morning, son. I'm just thinking about you. I know you have that big test today. Just wanted to tell you good luck.
What would you say are the main things that you've learned from that situation, if you had to summarize it to a principle or principles?
As far as my home, as far as my relationships, as far as kids and whoever walk into the house, I want to create a space of peace, of like, we're not going to fight. You're not going to get yelling from me, screaming from me, or anything like that. Um, and I want to create a place that's comfortable and peaceful.
Welcome to the Be Better broadcast. Today, we have a very important topic for you. And specifically, when I say you, I mean for the fathers who are tuned into the podcast, for the fathers who want to develop deeper relationships with their children, to the fathers who might not have a relationship with their children, but you want to have one and you're unsure of how to save that situation. And to do that, we are speaking with a man named Sam Asra, all the way from California. For those who don't know Sam Asra is a relationship expert who helps fathers to save their relationship with their kids. He's been working with fathers and children for over a decade, and he equips fathers with the tools, strategies, and the mindset needed to connect and understand their child on a deeper level. Very important topic today. If you take away something from this conversation, which I'm sure you will, please share this episode with just one other person and man in your life who could use it the most. You are the reason that the Be Better broadcast has grown the way that it has. We don't run ads. We don't run sponsors because we don't want to interrupt your experience. Thank you for sharing the show. You are the best part of the Be Better team. Without further ado, let's talk to Sam himself. Sam, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for being here, brother.
Hi, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So this is a very different conversation than we've had on the Be Better broadcast before. And to paint the picture, if you can you tell me, this father who wants to save the relationship with their child, what exactly does that situation look like?
You mean in terms of the father, like their
Yeah.
situation?
Yeah.
It's there's so many different factors that kind of go into it, but I can give a few examples. One scenario would be a divorced father who's uh, divorced, and they have kids, of course, and the kids seem to gravitate towards the mother. And there could be back and forth. There could be a lot of kind of tension between mother and father, and they're both kind of trying to win the kids over. And a lot of times, the mother has built a better relationship with the children, and if she has potentially malicious intentions, it can alienate the children. So that's called parental alienation, where one parent um, uh, sort of takes control of the relationships with their children, and controls the narrative when it comes to what dad is, what he does, who he is. Is he a good father? Is he a good person? Now, whether those things are true, exaggerated, not, is kind of irrelevant. But the point is, that is a very, very common situation that I see, um, that we help with, um, dealing with that. And a lot of times, unfortunately, the courts favor a lot of times the mothers. Most of the time, rightly so. Most
Mm.
of the time, but there are, unfortunately, the dads who actually have great intentions, and they get the short end of the stick here. Um, Another common example that I see is fathers who are very busy, uh, businessmen, entrepreneurs, guys high in the corporate ladder that work crazy hours and can't seem to find the time to connect with their children. They may be fine as far as like marriage, but because they're not around, that relationship suffers, and they're never able to create a deep relationship. And uh, part of what I teach is, doesn't matter if you're busy all the time, I teach you how to be able to still be able to build that relationship. And also, even if you're at a distance, there's a lot of times, well, I work across the country, or maybe in the case of, let's say I'm a divorced father and I only see my child, in the summer or whatever
Mm.
else, like, how do you still maintain that relationship? Then there's another scenario. I'll leave this as the last example. There's a lot of fathers who, when they traditionally, who are traditionally raised, and fathers who are traditionally raised, they're not raised to emotionally nurture and connect with their child. They're raised to protect and provide. That's their that's how normally they're kind of taught growing up, and so they lack the support and the education, the information, um, that is needed to understand how to connect with your child on a deeper level, what it means to communicate in a way that makes the child feel heard, and makes the child feel empowered and independent, and make the conversation pleasant. Because the idea is you want to talk to dad, like you want to enjoy a conversation with dad. You want to have a nice conversation. It shouldn't ever be something that's like small talk. Okay, hi son, hi dad. How's everything? Good. All right, see you later. Like, how do we get past that? So a lot of different factors. That we deal with. But the core idea is we have, to deepen that relationship, and in some cases, saving that relationship, salvaging it. So that's what we do.
Yeah, it's deeply concerning that there are so many households that don't have a father presence. And
Mhm.
especially what's even more concerning are the households that don't have a fatherly presence when the father does want to be involved, when the father does have his head on his shoulders, he's got his things in order. Because, yes, you might have fathers who want to be involved, but they are certainly not fit to be involved. That certainly happens. And like what you mentioned, a lot of the times the courts will side with the mother for good reasons, a lot of the time, but not every single time.
That's
And
true.
I've seen these situations happen. So to recap what you said, we've got fathers who are divorced where a narrative is created that espouses one form or several forms of ideas about the father to the child. We've got busy fathers who work long hours, sometimes across the country. We've got the distance that keeps them apart. We got many reasons why this happens. But what's deeply concerning is the average in the United States, when a child is born, 40% of children are born into and raised in single mother households today in the
Wow.
United States, at least. I'm not sure what the world is.
Wow. Yeah.
But that's a very scary stat because, I mean, I just pulled up other stats as well that says 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. 90% of all homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes. There's a whole list, but I'll list one more. 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes, 9 times the average, simply because there's no father in that home. So this is quite possibly one of the most important conversations we've had on the show for the specific person who's listening. So let me ask you this, because you also have a unique vantage point where you work with fathers, but you also work with the children. So what are you seeing from the children's point of view when you're working with a child who their father isn't involved or they're trying to be involved? What is the impact on the children from your perspective?
Again, it's just so broad as far as the what how they are feeling, but a lot of times, they are there's many different. I can give again a few examples here. So one example is, the culture that we are currently in, is much different than the one that was present 30, 40, 50 years ago. The way that, it is now is we have a lot of emphasis on individualism. We have a lot of emphasis on what makes me happy, on mental health, right? Back in the day, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was duty to family. So, the way that dad or mom might have grown up is, if their father or mother was a pain in the butt or whatever, it was like, oh, he's your father, you deal with it. Or let's say you're married to the other person and you say, oh, well, that's just her, and then we just deal with it. Now the culture has shifted. where it's more like, well, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm going to do what makes me happy, you know. And if dad or mom or whoever is a negative in my life, then I will take the steps to remove them. And so if the child perceives the father as a negative in their life, whether rightly so, wrongly so, some narrative created by mom, or it's actually true in their eyes. Instead of trying to work it out of, oh, he's your father, just deal with it, it's no, I'm going to do what makes me happy. I'm going to do what I'm going to preserve my mental health. And in today's culture, it is actually a step forward and almost courageous to say, oh, I cut him out, or, oh, I've distanced and like I've taken control back in my life. Back in like 40, 50 years ago, it was like almost like a dishonorable thing
Yes.
is a dishonorable thing to not talk to your father or mother, or like, how could you do that? That's your father, doesn't matter who, what, how he's acting, or what he's doing. So that's a big reason why nowadays children are do have that perspective. On top of that, mental health is much more emphasized. Therapy is a much more normal thing. Let's talk about it versus like back in the day, you didn't have that much information, nearly as much uh, thinking around how am I feeling and why am I feeling this way, and like there's much less information and awareness around depression, anxiety, and all these other things when it comes. And now we have a lot more focus in on it nowadays. So um, that is one big scenario as far as children looking from their perspective. Um, Another one that could be that I also see is a lot of times there's like some like misunderstandings that the child oftentimes talks past the father, father talks past the child, and they can never seem to get on the same page. And there's a lot of obstacles, a lot of reasons why that could be the case. You have, if dad grew up in a way that in a household where their parents respected no matter what, like their word was the final word, and they kind of grew up in that idea. Um, then they're not used to the fact that, well, what if the child doesn't want to do what you're telling them to do, you know? And also, I see this a lot where there's a transitionary period, around adulthood where child is becoming an adult and they're having their own decisions, judgments, and aspirations, passions, and they want to go in a different direction than what dad may want. And then there's a lot of tension there as far as, well, this is my life, I want, I'm going to do what I want to do, and then dad may disapprove, and then it may never get resolved. And how do you resolve that? So lots of scenarios. It's so
Yes.
broad. But that's why, like, the way we approach it is an A to Z. Like, we give you the fundamentals so that you're equipped versus like for any scenario within this big umbrella to be able to save your relationship, deepen it, no matter what the circumstances are, because those are endless as far as the different combinations that could exist. But if you have the principles, they remain the same as far as the fundamental ideas of how do you communicate, how do you build trust, how do you deal with the parental alienation? How do you deal with distance? How do you navigate the tough conversations? What happens if it escalates? How do you de-escalate? How do you sustain yourself through this journey? So, yeah.
Wow. No, I think what you said there too, where dad and child can't get on the same page, I think that's super valuable to families that are still together, where the father is super present. Of how do you better understand your child, right? Because they're not going to be working hard to understand you. They're a child. You don't really begin to try to understand your parents until you're at least of adult age. And me, I only really started to understand my parents when I was like early 20s, mid 20s, especially now where I'm 30. I can see them as the human beings, the flawed human beings that they are. They're not all knowing like you once think your parents are. So that concept of how to better understand your child is something I definitely want to ask you. And in a minute, I'd like to go through a few of these scenarios. And I know that these situations are extremely nuanced. I know a lot can be different, but I'd like to do a rapid fire with you here in a few minutes
Sure.
to, with the divorced father and busy fathers, and how we can work to improve these situations and fix these situations, if that's the word we can use. But before that, for those listening who are wondering, who is Sam? We know you've worked with fathers and children for over 10 years. Why is this a passion? And why is this so important to you to do the work that you do today?
Well, it boils down to a personal story. So me and my father, unfortunately, have a fractured relationship. Growing up, I grew up in a very strict Middle Eastern home, and my father was a very severe case as far as the Middle Eastern culture. He would strike me and my mom very often. He's very physically and emotionally abusive, unfortunately. Eventually, I grew old enough to, understand what was going on. Because when you're in that household, you think that's normal. Um, Eventually, I helped my mom kind of split up and defend her and everything else. Long story short, he did a lot of evil as far as like a father's concerned, and he was still able to salvage the relationship had he done a few things different. um, Knowing that for 20 years he abused us, and then actually he fled the country during that divorce because he didn't want to pay anything, pay alimony, pay whatever. So he ended up draining all the accounts and wiring it overseas. A lot of stuff, right? And I
Mm.
summarize it, 20 years of abuse in like a couple sentences. But the point is, a few years later, there was a one chance to kind of reconcile. And had he uh, taken ownership, then we could have at least been on talking terms. But unfortunately, he let certain things get in his way, whether it's cultural, whether it's personal, whatever it might have been. But that prevented him from having a relationship with me. And that's when I started working with, children and then eventually parents. And then I started to bridge an understanding. And I think I have a very unique perspective on both ends. And um, something else is like, it's very rewarding to see me turning one of my greatest pains into something that I can create for other folks. You know what I mean? Like knowing that, hey, like I'm going to not repeat what I experienced as far as like my relationship, and I want to bring you together. And I think that's one of the most rewarding things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's painful what you've gone through, and again, we can't begin to understand because you summarized 20 years into 2 minutes. However, without that experience, you wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be having this conversation today, and you wouldn't be going on to help so many other people through this experience. So it's easy to say, if you don't have your father in your life, it'll turn you into a person that you wouldn't have been if you did have your father. But if you had your father, who knows what you could become and what else
Sure.
you could do. So it's a touchy situation because you never know what the other side really could have held. So I'm curious, from that conversation, from that 20 years of growing up with your father, what would you say are the main things that you've learned from that situation, if you had to summarize it to a principle or principles?
Of principles of what not to do. Well, one thing is I never wanted to well, one of the big things is my home will always be a peaceful Zen place, because whenever I was at home and whenever my dad walked into the house after work, it was always walking around eggshells. The game was, how do I not piss off dad? Because even if he's stressed, or especially if he's stressed, one little thing could set him off, and it may not even be rational. He just felt like whooping someone's ass that day, for sport. I mean, I laugh and jest, but um, it is a very serious topic and serious
Mm.
concern. But yeah, so as far as my home, as far as my relationships, as far as kids and whoever walk into the house, I want to create a space of peace, of like, we're not going to fight. You're not going to get yelling from me, screaming from me, or anything like that. Um, and I want to create a place that's comfortable and peaceful. And I think that is very important when your child walks in. even if you're not agreeing on things, um, you're never going to get anywhere if you create a environment where it's walking on eggshells with any little thing sets you off, and it becomes a shouting match or what have you. That's one thing. Another thing is learning how to be empathetic and listening to the other person. My father wasn't very great at um, kind of trying to understand the other person's perspective. It was mostly about him. It was very kind of self-centered. And when you have children, I mean, a lot of times what mothers do well is they put their kids in front of them. They put their kids' needs in front of them. And as a father, you need to do the same, because why would I go to my dad if my mom is like sacrificing all this stuff for me? And then dad might be sacrificing in work and hours, and that is that is amazing, but like it's much more meaningful when, unfortunately, when it's about emotional connection and communication and time spent with them. Even though you are sacrificing and you are providing and you are working your butt off, that is not, it is acknowledged. But you have to understand, from the kid's perspective, they might see it as dad was never around.
Yeah.
So there are separate realities at play, that we also address, as far as like both people can be right in their own thinking. um, so it's not always one person's wrong, one person's right. It's like both of you are right, given what you're seeing, the view that you're looking at is, yeah, of course. And usually they think the other side is like crazy, like, I don't understand this and that, right? Father might be like, I don't understand that. I've worked my butt off and I sacrificed for these kids. I gave them everything I didn't have, and like my parents treated me worse and this and that. And then the child goes, well, my dad was never around. My mom always went to my games, and my mom dropped me off, picked me up, and you know I was never able to have a conversation with dad because he was too tired when he came back from work. And so I wasn't ever able to build a relationship with him. And then they divorced, and then it was a whole thing, and then I just stuck with mom. So
Yeah.
it's like, oh well, those both things could be understandable as far as the perspective.
What's up, Be Better family? It's Brandon Eastman here. And as a thank you for tuning in to the Be Better broadcast, I want to give you a very special gift. For a limited time, you can get a free digital copy of my book titled Be Extraordinary, Your Guide to Self-Mastery. This book is packed with insights and actionable steps that will help you to unlock your fullest potential in the 5 key areas of your life. But that's not all. Along with the book, I also want to give you the audiobook version absolutely free. Imagine having the power to transform your life right at your fingertips and in your ears, anytime, anywhere. Go grab your copy at bebetterindustriescom/book. You'll also find the link in the episode show notes. Go and grab your copy and join me in making a positive impact on the world. Now back to the show. Yeah, and that the whole idea of, I work these long hours to support the family, like I get it. Like I understand you've got to be, especially if you're a single income household, I understand. And at the same time, I understand that what if you didn't need to work as many long hours and still provide at the same level while giving more time and attention and love to your child? What if rather than either or, what if it could be and? What if you could have both? And then we have to really zoom into, well, what's the reason that you're not pursuing that option of less hours so you can spend more time and maybe even make the same money? Well, one, it might be a lack of knowledge. It might be simple ignorance. But what if it was more than that? What if it was the fear of spending more time with your child, for them to see who you are, for them to the fear that they won't love you as much if they saw you more and saw who you were, the fear that you couldn't give them enough, the fear that you weren't enough. There's so many different psychosomatic things that go into this that we could talk about for a whole episode in itself, probably several episodes. But I'm curious to hear from you before we go into these different areas here. What do you believe the father brings to the child's development versus what the mother brings to the child's development?
Well, of course, I'm going to, basically be stereotypical here because I mean, both
From your
sides can bring,
experience, you've
yeah,
spoken to fathers and children, so
yeah,
you know more than most people would
right.
know.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, because I'm just gonna speak of what I commonly see. Of course, I mean, you like for me, I when I grew up, like I turned out great. I'm an amazing person. I'm perfect. No, I'm just kidding. But so what the father brings to the table, and this is actually something I can speak from personal experience, is um, you bring a sort of a guiding figure when it comes to, at least for me, is like things that oftentimes my mom wouldn't be very well equipped to handle, because my mom is she's a traditional sort of housewife, home mom, amazing mom, but she her knowledge is limited when it comes to things that I would know as a man, right? So like, as far as like um, family or women or like relationships or even business, that's something that I had to kind of learn on my own, and that's something a father would play a role definitely when it comes to that, when it comes to paths and career. Again, this is traditional household for me at least, and like there's a sort of grounding that a father offers. This is why those statistics you said are true. Is oftentimes if mom is in a single household, the ability to discipline is kind of limited. When I say
Mm,
discipline, I don't mean physical discipline, but I mean uh, uh, an authority in the house that can keep the boundary and keep the boundary strong as far as what child should be going, able to do, not able to do, and those kinds of things. And that's, I think, often why families with fathers in them are less likely, like those children are less likely to get themselves into trouble, because father oftentimes kind of lay down the law more effectively. I see this a lot where like, when when a kid does something that's like not great, if mom knows about it, it's like, she might, tell them that that's wrong, but it's like, wait till I tell your father. That's
yes.
like, oh god, no, 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 please, like, come on, like, let's negotiate. But mom already knows. How come mom knowing is not enough? Right? How come that's not to say mothers aren't able or don't have the ability, but there is a something there that's like this masculine energy of a man, kind of brings that to the table, a level of authority that you see, like this is very common. Like, I'm gonna go tell your father. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
Wait till your father comes home. So there is a level of sort of le- leadership that is present when a father is around, and of course, the idea of two people in a household is much better than one, as far
mm,
as that, because you get to split the roles as far as that. When it's one person, I think you have to play all the roles, and those all the roles subsequently are less effective because you can't focus on any one thing. You kind of have to give a little bit of everything, and so it's not quite enough guidance, not quite enough discipline, not quite enough time, and not quite enough emotional connection, and everything kind of suffers. On the mother's side, as far as like typically what I see as far as what they bring in the relationship, is an idea of empathy, is an idea of nurturing, is emotional connection, is also a closeness. A lot of children who grow close with their moms are much more empathetic, are sensitive. Like I grew up, when my father left, like I'm in a household of women, so I was able to understand people a lot better and like emotionally connect with folks and be more emotionally intelligent. I think there's a lot of emotional
mm,
intelligence when it comes to, and it's really a cultural reason. Mothers, when they traditionally get raised, and motherhood is kind of part of growing up. As far as uh, what they learn from their moms, they might uh, get those responsibilities and knowledge and absorb from their own mom, or other women around them who, um, also from just culturally, they learn how to do that stuff a lot better. That's why oftentimes, like I kind of mentioned earlier, children have a more comfortable time telling these things to mom. They would never tell stuff to dad, or like there has to be almost a filtering process before coming to dad. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not gonna tell dad all the details. I'm gonna paraphrase it and leave certain details out. And that's
Yeah.
a problem. That's an issue because that means we can't talk to dad. And that's part of the issue of like why we can't build it. Why can mom talk and we have a deep conversation? Like, I know you have a girlfriend, or I know you have a boyfriend, but we're not going to tell dad, or we're going to relay it in a certain way, or like, whatever. Like, why are we filtering this? It's because dad is, we're risking dad pissing off dad, and we shouldn't have that response with our fathers. Like, our fathers should be like, just like mom, being able to talk and be calm. And yes, you might disagree. But the point is, we want to be able for a child to be comfortable enough to open up, and instead of just going through mom. That's why oftentimes the parental alienation happens, is because simply mothers have built a better relationship, closer than dads, and they have a larger influence as such. Like, there's
Mm.
just more trust, a deeper relationship. Who are you going to listen to? The person who hasn't been there for you that much, or the person who's have those deep conversations all the time, knows everything, knows your friends, knows your teachers, knows your hobbies, interests, been there for you, picked you up, cooked for you, did all these things, uh, versus dad, who still worked his butt off, but the they don't remember that, because they only remember how they feel and how they
Yes.
felt. They felt alone, or maybe there was a thing where, like, maybe it was a father son thing, father daughter thing. Their dad wasn't there. Like, they remember that more so than the hours that you put in, which again, admirable. But I'm just showing the perspective from the child of why mom, who maybe is a house mom and hasn't made a penny, um, uh, still connects with the child more effectively than the father. So.
Amen, brother. Amen. So I think it's super important to just point out the fact that a lot of fathers who want to be involved in their children's life weren't the type of father that you had. I mean, you had a very extreme end of father son relationship, and when I say that, I mean you went through actual physical abuse for many many years with your father. But what I thought was very interesting that you said, and what was beautiful that you said, is it sounded like you would have been open to reconciling with your father should he have stepped up to have that conversation with you to mend that relationship, at least to be on talking terms. But who knows where that could eventually lead. Is that right? If your father had stepped up, as you're an adult now, Sam, would you have given him the time of day to have that conversation and to create whatever form of a relationship could be created?
I think so, because I was very reluctant, very hesitant. Honestly, I was pressured to go see my father because my sisters were back on talking terms. I guess they, and so it was just me left. And everyone's kind of like, are you never gonna talk to him again? Like what? Like, come on, or whatever. It's been 4 or 5 years since you've talked to him. And so I kind of caved, and they said, look, go see him and make your decisions one time. Like, if you don't want it, that's fine. We're not going to bother you again. No one's going to talk about it, but do this. Do this for us. So I mainly did it for my family, my mom, sisters, whatever. It was the worst decision ever, though. I went over there, and I felt like I wasn't there. I was cognitively like disassociating with reality, because um you have like fantasies of what you would do if you ever saw a certain person again. You know what I mean? You dreamt about it and all this stuff. And that's not to say, like, I'm sitting there plotting. I don't even think about it anymore. But back then, it was like, there's just so much trauma, so much buildup of like the damage that was done. In any case, what had happened is, I went down to the trip, and it was me and my sisters, and then and he waited till the last day of like the 7-day trip to talk about the elephant in the room. First,
Mm,
it was just like, hey, small talk. Let's go buy you stuff. He's a very let me buy you stuff to amend things kind
give
of
gifts.
person.
Yep.
Gifts. So you love bombing, that sort of thing. So whenever he like did something wrong, like with my mom or whoever, he would kind of buy her gifts. That was his way of saying, like, I'm sorry, let's move on, that kind of thing. Flowers, or
Yep.
whatever else.
That's his love language. Yep.
Yeah, it's a love language, and we do teach that in the course, which is very important.
Yeah.
We'll get to that, but but yeah, but my love language is not gift giving. So I was like, I don't want any
Yes.
gifts. Um, And so the last day, like evening of, like before the flight's next morning, like that was the day. We sat down at the restaurant, and he was like, uh, and I was, I guess he was about to address the elephant in the room, and and here's what he said. He said, "I'm glad we can start a new chapter. We all made the mistakes. We all made things. We all did things that were." Not great. We all had situations, and I'm glad we could start a new chapter. And I grew very angry at that because
Yes.
how could you say we all made mistakes and it's not you and only you, and you're not taking responsibility, and you're trying to make it seem that you were part, like everyone else was in on it. Like who
Yeah.
like I didn't ask my butt to get beat, you know what I mean? I didn't ask bruises on my face. I didn't ask for my mom didn't ask for that stuff. We didn't ask for you to wire. By the way, never returned it. So like I don't understand how this makes any sense.
Hmm.
As we all made mistakes. Um, so I was like, so I started saying like, how does that, absolutely not. How does that make any sense? And then he started raising his voice, and I was like, that was the end of it. That's all I
That's it.
needed. That was
That's
all I
it.
needed. So I walked away. I told my sister, see, he's never changing, and that was
Yes.
it. That was the last time I saw him. So, but you saw, like, even then, had he said the right thing, had he said something like, look, I
I
messed
take responsibility.
I messed up. I did all these things to hurt you, and you list them. And we also show that in our training of like how do you apologize to your child,
Mm.
because it can be very hard for a father to effectively apologize without defending yourself. Um, and yeah, Hadi just said those things of like, here's what I've done to hurt you, and I'm terribly sorry. Here's what I'm going to do to make it right, and I hope that we can start a new chapter. That would have been totally different. I was like, you know what? Let's talk. Like that would have been whole, given all the things that happened. So like when some fathers see, if you're watching this and you seem hopeless of like, oh, I'm never gonna. I mean, look at the severity of that situation, and still had a chance to reconcile. There are children that are very forgiving if you radically change how the dynamic works, and you approach it with, I'm going to take ownership and everything else. As soon as you change, a lot of children are very forgiving. They say, you know what, dad's trying, that actually really is coming around, I'm going to go give him a chance. Some children aren't forgiving, but I see most children are forgiving once dad comes around, understands, okay, what the child needs. So
I think most people are forgiving when you're able to take responsibility and say, this is where I messed up. I did this, this, and this to you.
right.
How can I make this up? How can we start over? Having that transparent conversation. Will it always work? Maybe not, but maybe it'll work at a different time, right? Maybe it wasn't as sincere as it could have been. It could be a lot of different variables. So rather than go through those situations from earlier and do a rapid fire, because that's not going to be relevant to everybody. Let's talk about the principles, like what we're talking about now with taking responsibility, listing the things, the love languages. Let's talk about a few things, a few solutions that fathers can do right now in order to save or build the relationship with their child. What are the things that come to mind, and what are the key tenets that you teach in your course, in your teachings?
So one of the things, I can actually drop some actionable gems here, for the fathers out there. Um, let's take an idea of like, hey, you know what? That there's distance, or I don't have too much time with my child. How do I still build a relationship? How do I still make them feel like, I care about them and I love them? Um, it is kind of terribly obvious when I kind of mention like, you can just do this. So let's say, you travel, let's say you're in the corporate world, and you are working long hours. It could be as simple as a text. Take 30 seconds to say, good morning, son, just thinking about you, I know you have that big test today, just wanted to tell you good luck. Really simple. Or even better, do a 30-second video on the ride there, on the metro train, before you go get lunch. It literally could take a minute, and you would be surprised how meaningful that is to a child. I know one of my clients, they knew that their son was having like this big performance, and so what he did was he went and took 1 minute of his time, and said, "Son, like, I know this is your first performance. I know you're nervous. I just want to let you know whatever happens, I love you, and you're gonna do great, and this and that." And he couldn't make it. But the text he got back said, "This is one of the greatest things I've ever received. No
Mm,
gift, no price, no, no big restaurant, no big whatever, no vacation. That was more meaningful." Like, how does that make sense? Like for some fathers, it's like, well, we went on cruises and we went on this and we went on vacations and like I paid for those things. So like, why, you know, like where's the credit for that? It's like, well, the better bang for your buck is doing this. You know what I mean? Because they remember that, more so. I like of getting text because that's not really a common thing,
yeah.
But look how simple that is. You can do that in freaking India. Like you can go
Yes.
anywhere and do that, and it takes you nothing. So the idea of like, how do I do something? Like ask yourself, what can I do right now to let my child know that I'm thinking of them or like what and when you remember the performance or remember the test or exam or whatever else, that to them is like, oh, my dad was listening. Oh, he actually has been thinking about me because like how did he remembered. Like if someone remembers something about you, it's like he cares about you. So
They're
taking
going
an
to
interest.
replay that video. They're going to replay that video over and over. They're going to listen to that voice memo over and over
Right.
because it's precious. And it's, again, it's something simple. Like what you mentioned, it's simple, but we don't think about it because this is a tool that wasn't really around 7, 8 years ago. You didn't have the ability to send a voice memo or send a video over the air. Like that wasn't a thing. So our animal brains, we don't really think to do something like that. But that question you asked, like, what can I do? And I'll even add to that, what can I do for free to show them that I'm thinking about them, that I care about them, because that eliminates you sending them a gift or giving them a gift card or buying them a Roblox gift card or whatever it is. Like, what can I do for free in order to let them know I'm thinking about them and care about them?
Right. Another one I'll drop right here, is um, literally like when you have a conversation with them, see what apps are they using. Like, try the stuff that they're doing. Like, you'd be surprised how cool it is to have dad on with you playing a video game with you or
Mm,
playing the same app with you or dad's on TikTok now, oh no, watch him share a meme, watch him share whatever. It's like endearing. But like that's a way of like, like you're actually, and again, TikTok's free. You can make an account, you can, don't get too crazy with it, but share a video here and there and like one of their posts, comment on them. I mean, it's being involved without having to do too much. And yeah, so that there's a lot of ways, little things like this that are like we can do at a distance that don't take too much time and does massively impact your relationship with your child. Video games is a big one, like taking an interest in what they do. So it's like, oh, they so like oftentimes child might come to dad like, dad, can you please buy me this new whatever video game? And then you could say, I would love to buy this for you, on one condition. What's the one condition? I get to play with you.
ooh,
Like, oh, like that
yeah.
that'll like send them like, like, yo, that's so cool. Yes, let's go. Like, take an hour on Sunday and play with them. It's like, and if it's an online game and you can both download the application or whatever, you can do it at a distance, or even better, be
True.
in the same room if you can. But point is, like this stuff, that's just a lack of knowledge. I just don't think it's like a like, oh, like your fathers just don't care or it's too much work. I just think it's a lack of like, well, I've never thought of that, and that's what I do. That's what we do. So
Brilliant. Love that. If you're in California and I'm in upstate New York, let's download Fortnite for the few weeks that I'll be away from you. Let's play some Fortnite. Let's play some Roblox, whatever it is for these kids. And obviously it'll change based on their age and stuff like that. I'd like to, for a second, I'd like to specifically speak to divorced fathers who are in a situation similar to what you brought up earlier of maybe the mother has created a narrative or maybe not a narrative. Maybe they're a great mother, great father, but the child has simply chose to stay with the mother and they've as by default developed a deeper relationship than the father has. So
Yep.
we've got an imbalance of relationship here. And the reason I want to speak to this is because 40 to 50% of marriages do end in divorce. And the second marriages are even higher, with 60 to 67% of
Gosh.
those ending in divorce. So this is a big demographic.
Yep.
So what would you say to the father who is in that situation? What can they do in order to deepen and build their relationship with their child?
I think being present. I mean, it seems so cliche, but the fact where you're at a disadvantage is the presence factor, and so you have to do what you can to be present. And I think also focusing on the relationship with the child and not so much on the ex-spouse. It's very common, especially if there's bad blood between, dad and mom, is to focus on, well, she said, he said, well, they said, well, they're doing this, they're doing that. And even if mom might be not saying great things about dad, it does not do you any good to fire right back. It does you better to be a role model, to never speak bad about the ex-spouse, and the child will eventually put two and two together, because if mom is saying, well, your dad is a terrible person, he does A, B, and C, but you've shown that you've never done those things, or you've stopped doing those things. If you previously have done them, there's no shame around it. But let's say you've rectified those things, though those actions are going to speak a lot louder than saying, well, your mom's a liar, you know. So going back and forth, it's better to be a role model. And then presence, so doing what you can, even if you only get a month out of the year, like some of the things we talked about. How do you still stay more present in your child's life? Because it's a matter of how much time you're spending with them and how much interaction you're having with them. Where mothers get a lot of the leverage is simply they have a lot more time with the child. They take them to school. They take them to all their hobbies, their extracurriculars. They spend all the time at home with them. If they're at home, they go to sleep and then they wake up in the same household. And that might not be the case for the father. So the father has to make up for that by doing other things, being a little more creative as to how to become more present in the child's life. So that's would be a tip for the fathers out there.
That's great advice. Great advice. And it's not easy all the time to be present, especially when we're distracted by so many things. And when you do have that limited amount of time with the person you want to build that relationship with, whether it's child or spouse or whoever, being present with them is critical. So let's talk about what you do to help fathers, aside from coming on here today and just sharing all this for free so people can have something to take away immediately. You have coaching programs for fathers. And specifically, right now, you've got an 8-week online coaching program. So it doesn't matter where people live, they can become a part of this. So, can you give us an idea, especially for the people who've never done anything like this? They've never gone through an online program, but they know that this is something that they want to do. They want to mend that relationship with their children and they're willing to do whatever it takes. What does that program look like for people like that?
So, our main offering is an 8-week group coaching program. What that looks like is it's 8 weeks, and you have a module once a week, at same day, same time every week, and we go through the certain module, and then we'll have a Q&A session after to answer any and all questions, and then you'll have work afterwards to apply the concepts that you learned, and then we're there to support you every step of the way. Um, the way that the course is built is it's built in 8 modules, and it takes you from A to Z, beginning to end, of like fundamental principles, what it really means to be a successful father, and what are those pillars and the principles around that. And then communication, how do we communicate? How do we handle escalations and de escalate? How do we keep our cool? How do we build trust? How do we navigate tougher conversations when, like we start talking about the elephant in the room? Like, how do we navigate that? What happens if your child starts firing, as far as, firing insulting things or yelling, or, you know, uh, maybe they're hurt, or maybe they got an idea from mom, and, they're just like, well, screw you, dad, A, B, and C. How do you handle that?
Yeah.
How do you write a sincere? How do you be sincere in the apology? But if you're, this course is designed that if whether you're on talking terms, like let's say you can never get past the small talk with your child, that's designed for you. Or the other side of the spectrum, you haven't talked to your child in 10 years and you don't know where to start, how to reach out, how to initiate, and like, is it even possible? And what if they don't respond? What do I do? What's the strategy? Should I keep following up? How often do I follow up? All those questions are answered in that course. Also, how do you take care of yourself during this journey, understanding that this is a marathon and not a sprint? The relationship didn't stop in one, didn't, once you break the trust, it takes a lot of time to build it back up. So understanding that it's a journey, it's a marathon. And then also, like, what happens when you reconnect? Let's say you haven't talked in 5 years, 10 years. Like, how does that look like? Is it it's going to be awkward? How do I what do we talk about? Like, what do we do? And like, how do I navigate that? And how do I avoid re-triggering that estrangement again? Uh, because similar to that divorce statistic that you said, is similar to estrangement statistics as well. So someone who has a child who's estranged from their father one time is more likely to do it again, very high rates to do it again
Hmm.
because they've already done it. I mean, it's like, they've already done it versus someone who's never done it and and like now is considering it. That's a huge decision for them, but once someone already has done it, it's kind of like, well, see, he didn't change, back to
Yes.
estrangement, like, and so and then we talk about like the long game because yes, the course is 2 months, but I want to equip you forever. So I want to, make sure we understand long run, what's the strategy? How do we keep applying all the things that we are teaching? So that's the eight-week course. And then you also get a private community. And I think this is very important, a private community where it's fathers just like you who have signed up, or there's just like the listener who has signed up. Um, and it's a safe space that we can share insights, lessons, celebrate progress. That is very important because fathers really don't get a space to talk about this stuff. They
True.
really, I mean, in business and in corporate world, or even their friends, I mean, there's no good place to really talk about this. I mean, I suppose therapy, but therapy is not. Therapy don't have the community of like
Yes.
everyone doing the same thing, and oftentimes, unfortunately, they aren't equipped. They don't have the knowledge to know how to save the relationship. They are great at unpacking what you're feeling and perhaps understanding what you're feeling and validate what you're feeling. But as far as like how do we rectify this, there's no real direction as far as that goes. And also, a lot of fathers aren't really interested in therapy, at least in traditional fathers. So this is a great place for them to have that. And when you have a community of fathers like that, the burden is lifted. When you share a struggle, everyone's kind of going through the same thing. You realize, what, it's not just me. So it's a way to help you endure the process and to exchange ideas and conversate with other people just like you. And it's a very supportive thing to have a community. So that's another thing that comes with the program.
Wow. God bless you, man, for creating this program and for helping fathers and children around the world to reconnect with each other. Because when that happens, those people become stronger and everyone becomes stronger as a result. And like you said, this isn't something that you can just talk about with your friends at work. This is a very close to home subject. And especially as the men, as the leaders in the home, it's a shameful thing. It can feel like a shameful thing to have these conversations with people who aren't directly going through it. Or if it is a conversation with someone else who is going through something similar or different in the same umbrella, it can just become a complaining fest of just going back and forth of what's not working versus talking about solutions, which I'm sure people will find more of that in your community. So this is necessary. It's critical. I hope that more and more and more people are doing what you're doing. Maybe you can lead them to create something for themselves. Like these fathers, who knows who you could help that then goes off to do what you're doing today. So you are a catalyst for change, Sam. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for giving us points today that we can take right after this conversation and use. But I didn't expect or know where this conversation would go, but I'm very, very happy with where it went. And while my son's 11 months, tomorrow. So obviously things are great. Things are working great, but this will help me because all these things are beneficial to me too, right? It's as simple as a text or a video or a voice message or being present with him while I'm with him. So these are just as important for fathers who are with their children as those who aren't. So I thank you very much, brother. This has been amazing. Thank you, Sam.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
If this was beneficial for you, go to the description below. The first link is going to be a link to start a conversation with Sam so that you can ask him all the questions that you have about his 8-week online group coaching program to see if it makes sense for you, to see if you're the right person for the program, and to see what it entails for you. Start that conversation with Sam. I'll also put his social profiles below and any other way that you can connect with him as well. If you found value from this conversation, please share the show with just one other person who could use this episode as well. You never know who might hear it that takes a step or an action because of what they heard today on the show. You can make a big difference. Thank you for being the best part of the Be Better team. Thank you for watching and listening. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.